here's a subject that I'm a expert on. Silly thoughts lead to silly talk. Silly talk leads to silly actions. Silly actions get you silly results. So choose wisdom. Now, I'm not an expert on the wisdom part of it, but I am an expert on the silliness because I've made so many different silly decisions in my life. And sometimes it's just a conversation. I had a client at the Mandalay Bay. His name was Bill. And Bill had come in, and I would call it the corporate shuffle because I knew he was in corporate at the Mandalay Bay. Um, I didn't know to the degree, but at first, but I made friends with him. We connected. I used to cut his hair probably every 21 to 28 days, somewhere around there. And as I was, taking care of him, we would talk about different things. And come to find out, years later, well, maybe I would say months later, I found out that Bill was actually one of the principal owners of the Mandalay Bay. His name was Bill Richardson. And he's an incredible guy, incredible family. The family used to come in too, and used to get to take care of a lot of the family. And but Bill and I formed a relationship over the years, and he was just a really nice guy, very present with everybody. And I remember asking him this very silly question. I had just moved on from that company, and I was starting my own, and so I was going to have to do TI, which is tenant improvement. And if you haven't done commercial real estate or commercial construction, there's a TI, which is tenant improvement, and they generally will give you an allotment. The people who you sign the lease with, depending on how you do it. What I would suggest is to negotiate well there, and you can also get rent abatement, which is something that I would definitely suggest. And then I would put into the contract, which I didn't at first, make sure that you put a stipulation in the contract that your rent abatement doesn't start until your construction or your TI work is done. Now that's all the technical stuff, but I didn't know any of this stuff. All I knew is that I was building a business. I was going to have to do construction. I didn't know anyone in construction. And so I guess I needed a general contractor. So as Bill sits down in the chair, I'm like, hey, how you doing, Mr. Richardson? Would you happen to know any general contractors? He chuckled and, almost kind of laughed to himself a little bit. And he was like, I might know a few. And he, left that day. He made a couple calls. I get a frantic call from a guy named Eric Schweitzer. Eric Schweitzer is in LA, and he says, hey, I just want to let you know, Mr. Richardson just called me, told me that you needed a general contractor. We've got you taken care of. Don't worry about anything. I land back in Las Vegas in 1 hour, and as soon as I land, I'll give you a call, and everything's taken care of. I could hear the franticness in his voice, and I'm thinking, I don't even know who you are, but I guess I connected the two at that point, thinking that maybe Mr. Richardson had made a call. Well, come to find out, Eric Schweitzer was one of the general contractors who built the Mandalay Bay. Well, I didn't have a salon or a business that I was growing like the Mandalay Bay. I had 1,200 square foot. Actually, it was a little over 1,200. They called it 1,300 square foot. And here I am thinking, wow, this guy who built the Mandalay Bay is going to, and then they have a meeting with me and they sit down and they ask me, what would you like? And the only term that I knew in all of construction was level 5 walls, because I had heard a person in construction, at the Mandalay Bay, and they were like, oh, when we did the Mandalay, we did level 5 walls. And that's all I knew. Well, little did I know that level 5 walls are next to perfect, and they're one of the most expensive things that you can have because the wall has to be absolutely perfect. So if you get a scratch on it, a mark on it, you have to paint from corner to corner. You can't just spot paint it because the texture on the wall is so smooth. And they generally use this in really high-end, resorts, casinos, things like that. And so it's the only term that I knew. So when I go in to meet with Eric Schweitzer, he asked me what I wanted. And I said, well, I don't know about all the stuff, but I know I have to have level 5 walls. Well, you can imagine Eric Schweitzer is thinking, like in his head, like I could see him kind of set back a little bit. And then he looked at the plans of where I was. It was a little, 1,300 square foot box. And that 1,300 square foot box, him and the other guy that's sitting next to him, his name is Joe, and Joe is an awesome man. And Joe and him start kind of laughing, and I'm thinking, now pride's setting in. Why are they laughing? Are they laughing at me? But they were laughing because the 1,300 square foot place that they were going to build for me, everything was going to be completely fine because the projects that they took on, and most of them that they actually denied, were 10 times the size of mine because it was too small for them, because they were doing things like the Mandalay Bay, the rum jungle when it first came in. Well, as I went through and I said the level 5 walls, they said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes, that's what I have to have." Well, they went through and they did the level 5 walls. It became the most expensive thing in the entire environment and that salon, and it's still there. We sold the company, but it's still there. And you could go to Las Vegas at Style and Grace Hair Gallery now, and you can see these level 5 walls that no one ever complimented me on. No one ever said anything about it. I don't know if I made the return on my investment. The company went really well, and we were very, very fortunate. But that silly statement came because I didn't know any better. I didn't have any wisdom in that situation. All I knew was one term. The silly question to Bill Richardson, "Do you know any general contractors?" When Bill Richardson's one of the largest, if not the largest, contractor in all of Las Vegas, meaning that his company built the Mandalay Bay. His company that he owned, the Mandalay Corporation, his construction company built the Mandalay Bay, and it built Resort World. And that construction company built our 1,300 square foot place. But that was because of a relationship, and and maybe that silliness that I asked, the question, or that silly question that I asked, it turned out to be a great thing. But it's amazing because sometimes we have to seek wisdom in the places. I asked the silly question to Mr. Richardson. I asked that silly question, "Do you know any contractors?" Well, I guess that if I would have known the level of which he played, maybe I wouldn't have asked the question, so that helped me. But I tell you, the next silly statement that I made with the level 5 walls, that was the craziest thing because it cost me more. I mean, honestly, it was the most expensive thing in the whole entire place. And what God calls us to do in Proverbs 11 is he calls us to understand our identity in him, which will eradicate the silliness in our life. So why don't we get this party started?
Nothing more on my mind. I got to shine, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.
What if all of your mistakes were on display? I tell you, probably the greatest thing that you could do in your life, in your business, in your relationship is workshop things. I've been on this kick because workshopping came from Mike Ganino. I asked him about jokes. I asked him about keynote speaking. He's a keynote trainer. He helps people to be able to take a keynote and make it entertaining. And he comes from a theatrical background, not only just comedy, but an improv background. And so his theater background, he wants the stories to actually have life. And I said, "Well, how do you do it?" And he said, "Well, you just workshop things. You got to work at it. You got to, test these things out." I'm telling some of these stories for the first time. I haven't told the story on the podcast about Mr. Richardson. And me sitting down, seriously, as a young guy, never having a company before, and sitting down with, I didn't realize. I knew he was the owner of the Mandalay Bay at the time, and the Mandalay Corporation, which is it was Mandalay, Luxor, Excalibur, Monte Carlo, slots of fun, circus, and like 5 other casinos outside the state. And I remember being around him, and it helped me because my parents had always taught me that it wasn't about what the person did; it was who they were, and you want to be able to treat everyone like a VIP. So these connection points, but I didn't realize that he was also the largest, builder in all of Las Vegas, one of the biggest contractors, if not the biggest, and had the biggest construction company. So when I asked him, Mr. Richardson, do you know any general contractors? I think back on it, and I'm like, what a silly, like, I was ignorant. Sometimes that ignorance can help you. Um, but in this case, when I'm talking about the silliness of my my desire to have level 5 walls wasn't the greatest in the world. But even in telling these stories, I'm doing this because I want to workshop the story, and I want the story to be able to get better. I want to be able to deliver it in less time and be able to deliver it to you, each and every one of you, in a better time. And what I would suggest is, if you want to get better at something, just try it. Try it, do it, work at it, and write it down. If it works, write it down, systemize it, repeat it. If it sucks, then just stop doing it. And this is the way that we built our company. So with that company that I'm talking about, that we did the construction for, and we had the level 5 walls. Well, I learned that I didn't do level 5 walls the next time. There's no way on earth. I realized that a textured wall was going to be just fine. And so no more level 5 walls, but I had to learn that through a silly decision. And that silly decision cost me a lot of money. Although the walls were really nice. And if you could compliment me on them in the comments, it would be great. It would be awesome. Proverbs 11 calls us to understand our identity in him, which will eradicate silliness. And when I say silliness, silliness is the absence of wisdom, and the absence of wisdom is just not having the right use of knowledge, right? I didn't have the right use of knowledge when I talked about level 5 walls. Well, Mr. Richardson kind of chuckled when I asked him, "Hey, do you have any recommendations as far as general contractors?" He kind of chuckled because, like, he had the right use of knowledge. He had wisdom in that place. He understood. He had the experience, and he knew that everything. And when those guys laughed at me when I first asked for level 5 walls, or I showed them a 1,300 square foot place, when they laughed at me, it wasn't because they were making fun or poking fun or anything like that. It was just the fact that they looked at it and said, this is no challenge. We've built other things before. We've built things on a way larger scale. This project that you're talking about is not that big of a deal for us, and we'll make sure that it's handled. So let's go through this. In Proverbs 11, verse 1 is, do you know your name and your value? Before we know our name, right? And this is what we search for. A lot of us search for, what's my purpose? Why am I here? What am I doing? All these things. Honestly, to figure out your purpose, just go and, identify what you're good at, what you're gifted at, and what you don't have to work to be good at. And then go give that away to the whole entire world. That's your purpose, right? And do you know your name and value? Do you know the value of your name? And when you start to spend time with the one who built you in the first place, he'll help you to understand that your identity in him, not in the world. This is where I get challenged, especially being almost 50 years old, is a lot of my value for a lot of my life has been wrapped up in what I do. Maybe I'm the only one. I don't believe that, but maybe it is. In verse 2 is ego versus humility. And when you choose humility, things tend to grow. When you choose ego, they tend to die. So just be conscious of this. You could have a positive ego, though. I mean, that could be there, but just be very conscious of it. Humility always, I tell you, humility will always grow, and ego will always die. In verse 3 is truth breeds integrity. When you study truth, and when you study the truth of who you are and where your value's at, what happens is you'll start to realize, like my pops would say, you're the greatest, son, so act accordingly. Well, first I had to hear it, then I had to believe it, then I had to apply it. And once I applied the fact that I'm the greatest, so I need to act according to that greatness, it stopped the ego from coming in, and it it helped the humility, because if I'm the greatest, and that's what my pops was telling me, that I'm the greatest at what? At just being myself. If I'm the greatest, if you're the greatest, you need your responsibility is to act according to that greatness. So every day and every moment and every part of your job, you have to live up to your identity, and your identity is that you're the greatest. So it's one of those things that my pops gave to me, and as a kid, and it was challenging because then it holds you responsible to it. Anytime that there's multiple verses, I find that there is a large emphasis on this. And so in verse 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 11, 16, 18, 19, 20, 21, 23, 27, 30, and 31. So buckle up. This one's important. Your value is in your character. Your value is in your character. In verse 7, where do you place your value in your life? Where do you place the value? Do you place it on money? Do you place it on status? Do you place it on things? Do you place it on what you do? Where you place your value will tell you a lot about your path, and so just be conscious of where we place that value. In verse 9, wisdom, knowledge, action. Wisdom, knowledge, action. I have the tendency to flip them around. I have the tendency a lot of times to act before I have the knowledge, and I get the knowledge before I have the wisdom. The right use of knowledge is wisdom, and that comes from the fear of God. Then you can bring in knowledge, and then you can bring in action. But when you reverse them, that's where we get into challenges. In verse 12, it's a big one. Slow to speak. In verse 13, trustworthiness is invaluable. Think about how trustworthiness in all relationships can foster things that will grow. In verse 14, seek wise counsel. In verse 15, debt crushes the spirit, because when you get indebted, whether it be personally, professionally, spiritually, or financially, that creates a weight on your shoulders. That weight on your shoulders has a tendency to get you to act out of character. When you act out of character, you get results that are not in line with your character, and then you start to get frustrated. Then you start to need to fix it, so you go further and deeper into debt, and you put more pressure on yourself to act less like yourself. I told this to a kid when I was working with him. I said, look, if you as a person don't show up every day for the job that you got, you'll lose the job. They looked at me and they were like, well, that's a redundant statement. And I said, but every single time that you walk into this place indebted to something else with weight on your shoulders, you're walking in as not yourself. And you do that enough times, you lose the opportunity that's in front of you. In verse 17, kindness always wins. Kindness always wins. And kindness is to be of contribution to people. Being nice is just out of obligation. In verse 22, discretion comes from wisdom. Discretion, right? Discretion is looking at the scenario and saying, I can do it, but do I need to? Is it right for me? And then you get to a point when you build up that discretion, that discernment comes in, where you can see it from a mile away, even though it looks shiny, that you choose not to do it because it's not in line with your purpose. And what is your purpose? It's just identifying your gifts and then go give them to the world. In verse 25 and 26, generosity wins. Generosity always wins. If you have the tendency to love on people, lift them up, everything works out in the end. And if it isn't working out, it's not the end. That's a something that my friend John Paul says all the time. And in verse 28, in whom do you put your trust? This one's a strong one because wherever we trust, our feet will move towards that thing, meaning that we'll put ourselves in places, whatever we trust. God's calling us, trust Him, trust Him, trust Him, trust Him as much as possible because He wants you to move closer to Him. The closer you are to Him, the more respect that you have for Him, the more wisdom that you'll get. Once you get that wisdom, He'll bring knowledge in, then He'll bring understanding, He'll bring insight, He'll bring discretion, He'll bring discernment, He'll bring discipline, He'll bring strength, and He'll lead you right back to the fear of God or the respect of God, meaning that you just spend time with Him. In verse 29, as we finish up, is honor your family. Honor your family in all that you do. And my pops used to say it. He said it in Spanish, and I can't even say it. I won't even kill it in Spanish. But he said, it's all about the family. And if it's not about the family, it's not about anything. And that's what his dad would say to him. And my brother and I, we would always be like, yeah, whatever, Pop, because there's sometimes that you've done some stuff that's not in line with our family. But I think that what he was wanting us to understand is that's the way that if you build on that foundation, not saying, I don't think that he was saying, this is what I'm doing. He's saying, sons, this is what you should do. And if in the event that you do this, then everything else will fall in line. And I watch my brother Rob, and he bases every single thing around his family. And guess what happens? His business flourishes, his relationships flourish. People want to be around him. He's just a light in this world, and everything is about his family. And as we finish up, is when you're rooted, grounded, then you'll be producing fruit. When you're rooted in wisdom, when you're grounded in wisdom, then you'll produce phenomenal fruit in your life. You see, because silly thoughts lead to silly things that you'll say. Those silly things that you say will lead to silly actions, and silly actions will get you silly results. So choose wisdom. But I want to encourage you too, because when you make a silly decision like I did in asking like a silly question, right? A silly question asking, hey, Mr. Richardson, do you know any general contractors? God's got grace because He could take that silliness and turn it into something absolutely beautiful. Me asking that silly question opened up a door for me to have the largest construction company in Las Vegas build a 1,300 square foot place that, basically it was the first business that any of us in our family had ever had. We had never done this before. I had never built before, but I learned. But He took that silly question that I asked and He turned it into something amazing. I had another silly demand in level 5 walls, and God turned it into something. Not only did He turn it into a lesson to help me to understand you don't need level 5 walls, but He turned it into a situation that created an environment that ultimately became a brand that was across the country and gave opportunities around the world. Did we do anything? Did we do everything absolutely perfect? No, we made more silly decisions. We needed a lot of grace. We needed a lot of forgiveness. So I guess as I look at this, you are going to make silly decisions. You are going to have silly thoughts. You are going to say silly things. You're going to have silly actions. But when you choose to walk with God, He'll make all of it right. And that's where His grace is. And that's what I want to leave you with today. I want to encourage you in all that you're doing. The relationships that you make today will be the foundation of the things that you dream of tomorrow. And I want to thank you, Mr. Richardson. If you ever hear this, You impacted my life, my family, um, generations to come, and you didn't have to do it. And I appreciate you. And I'm sorry for asking you silly questions, but I appreciate that you had grace with me in all of it. So, if you don't have the workbook for Inchstones too, check out the workbook. It takes you through the corresponding proverb for the corresponding day. That's what I'm doing here is Proverbs 11, and it takes you through that. We're going to actually start off a challenge here in a little bit, and we're going to be going through, and I'm going to be challenging you on reading the corresponding proverb for the corresponding day and how it can apply in each and every area of your life, personally, professionally, spiritually, and financially. So my name is Kelly Cardenas, and that's cue for me to officially be off the hot seat. Peace, love, and soul.
Nothing more on my mind. I got to shine, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make